Wojtek from Eurosite, the European Land Conservation Network. To begin our webinar, just a short introduction. As you can see on the slide, today's title is Peatlands Farming and the Common Agricultural Policy. And we will host two great speakers, Leonor, Cesar Neves from European Landowners organization, will tell us about first steps to proactive peatland management, and Wiktor Kotowski from Centrum Ochrony Mokradeł and also professor of Warsaw University, preliminary recommendations for the Common Agricultural Policy based on the analysis prepared under Life Multi Peat project. And at the end of the webinar, we'll have a short Q&A session that you can ask your questions to our speakers. What's important, the webinar is recorded. I hope you don't mind that, and we'll share it. A recording will be shared after the webinar. And in general, if you'd like to ask any questions, you can use Q&A button, which is somewhere down there. You will find it. So if you've got questions to our speakers, do not use chat rather, but Q&A, and then we'll pick the questions at the end of the webinar. And a very short introduction about our network, Eurosite, European Land Conservation Network. You can see on the slide the group of our members and other people cooperating with the network. The network was established in 1989. We've got at the moment 80 members from 25 European countries, and we can tell that our members, they represent 14 million hectares of different protected areas. So we can also say that we represent something like 12,000 site practitioners, and we've got 9 board members, 15 council members, and 11 people working in our secretariat, our staff, and I'm one of them. We've got also 9 strategic partnerships. And the vision of Eurosite is a Europe where nature is cared for, protected, restored, and valued by all. And in general, the most important mission is to create a connection, to bridge the gap between different stakeholders, practitioners, policymakers, decision makers, and to provide you help in exchange of knowledge and experience in site management. We've got several working groups, and at least 2 of them are directly related with the topic of today's webinar. It is Peatland Restoration and Management Group, and Agriculture, Biodiversity, and Climate Group. If you would like to find some more information about Eurosite, you can just enter our website and to find some other events and activities of Eurosite. Now I would like to invite here our first speaker from European Landowners organizations. Leonor, could you switch on your camera?
Yes, thank you, Wojtek, for having me here today. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy that we came here today to discuss peatlands and why they matter. Wojtek, would you mind sharing the presentation? I don't know if you are ready.
Yes, exactly. Just on the way.
Perfect. Thank you.
Wait a sec. It's
Not an issue.
It's almost there.
I hope you don't mind if I audio continue a bit so that the people know a bit about myself. I'm Leonor Neves. I'm a Policy and Projects Officer for Biodiversity at the European Landowners Organization in Brussels. And we are a federation of national associations from Europe and beyond, representing landowners, land managers, and rural entrepreneurs. And I'm really excited to introduce you today 3 manuals on peatland management that the European Landowners Organization has developed, and which we contributed to this EUKI project. And I wanted to introduce a bit the EUKI project first. Perfect. Thank you. Next, exactly. Perfect slide. Thank you. So the Building European Peatlands Initiative, a strong alliance for peatland climate protection in Europe, is a project funded by the European Climate Initiative, EUKI, which is a financing instrument by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. It started in November 2022 and will end in April of the next year. It's implemented by 4 partners from 4 European countries, each of them bringing a different perspective to the table. Eurosite is the project coordinator, MSF, CWEB, and ELO are the other partners. Next slide, please. Thank you. Peatlands are among the world's most valuable ecosystems. They store immense amounts of carbons, support biodiversity, and regulate water systems. So the EUKI project here helps to support the adaptation of peatland strategies and policies to promote protection and increase management of sustainable peatlands, increasing awareness and bringing together stakeholders in the aim to get it up to multinational collaboration between countries to successfully mitigate climate change on an EU level. And with this mission in mind, the reason why we developed these manuals, finding them so critical, is that the peatland covers just 3% of the Earth's surface, land surface, but they store twice as much carbon as all the world's forests combined. And if peatlands are drained or degraded, they release massive amounts of CO2, contributing to climate change. So the goal here was to promote sustainable practices that balance productivity with environmental preservation and more of a give first steps to land managers, landowners, any stakeholders connected to get an idea why it is important to get involved with peatland management and how one can do so, or better, where to start so that one doesn't get overwhelmed. All manuals try to give ideas also where funding for such activities can be found. Of course, each member state has different initiatives and private investment opportunities. However, we try to highlight some EU LIFE projects and mention the CAP, which I will do a bit later here. Especially the restoration manual has some tools to be able to evaluate the conditions of your peatland to a certain extent so that you can understand where you are and what is needed to achieve the goals that you set for yourself and your peatland. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, there are 3 manuals. Their focus is on farming in peatlands, one is farming in peatlands, highlighting sustainable agricultural practices, peatland restoration, providing methods to restore peatland, degraded peatlands, and forestry, addressing forest management in peatland ecosystems. Each process addresses unique challenges, offers practical solutions to ensure that peatlands are preserved for the future generations. Indeed, the last manual is currently still being written, and the other 2, I am happy to say, will be out before Christmas as a little gift to my EUKI partners, who really have been amazing at helping me in this. And I know that some of them are present here today, so I want to take the moment in front of everybody to really thank them. You guys are great. But to get back to the subject, the first manual, as mentioned, focuses on farming peatland. Next slide, please. In short, it explains the role of peatlands playing in carbon storage and the challenges that arise when they're drained completely for agriculture. This brochure emphasizes the importance of adapting sustainable farming techniques that minimize peatland degradation and carbon emissions, and tries to provide solutions for farmers to balance food production with environmental protection. So they are able to use their land and able to fulfill the expectations that we give them, that they receive to feed us, but also not to cause excessive damage to the environment, which, while we like our food, we should also try and want to avoid. So peatland and agriculture is quite a tricky relationship that we need to learn to make work. Tricky why? Because to start, traditionally peatlands are drained to make the land more suitable for crops and livestock, but this drainage causes the peat to dry out and shrink, and this sinking of the ground because of underground movement, and this is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, soil degradation, water loss, and increases the risk of floods. So for farmers, water regulation issues and unsustainable land use is happening here, which means a loss of long-term productivity. So the question is, how can we farm peatlands without damaging them? And the answer lies in sustainable farming techniques, and this is where the first manual steps in. One key approach, as you can also see in the picture on the slide, is keeping peatlands wet. And this can sound counterintuitive for those who knows that their crops can't or shouldn't get too soggy, but it is possible with innovative solutions like paladiculture and wet agriculture. Paladiculture involves growing crops that thrive in wet conditions like reeds, cranberries, cattails, or willows. And these crops are economically valuable and environmental friendly. For example, reeds, I don't know if you can see it on the slide, perhaps a bit too small, are used for various things such as construction materials or heating houses, etc. And so the manual highlights ways to manage water tables effectively. First, higher water tables mean healthier soils that remain productive for longer. I believe that water management at the moment is quite critical, especially with us experiencing increasing droughts and decreasing water quality. So it's not just about the quantity of water, it's also about the quality. And so that switching to practices that help the land recover and allow the land to give us time and again something back is really the aim here, so that we can maintain the land on which we rely so much. So the Farming in Peatlands manual offers practical science-backed solutions to protect peatlands while supporting productive agriculture. It shows us that sustainable farming doesn't mean you have to sacrifice yield or income. It's really about adopting practices that work with the land, not against it, and with the aim of keeping land healthy forever. Next slide, please. The second manual, Peatland Restoration Manual, focuses on bringing degraded peatlands back to life. When peatlands are drained or damaged, their roles are reversed, so they become carbon sources instead of carbon sinks, releasing greenhouse gases, reduce their biodiversity, and we worsen the risk of flooding or droughts. So this manual provides recommendations to restore degraded peatlands, turning them back into functional, thriving ecosystems. Restoration isn't just an environmental priority. I think I have to say it's really a climate solution. So as mentioned before, peatlands account for 3% of the Earth's land area, yet they store twice as much carbon as the world's forests. So when drained, they are a major global emitter of CO2 and responsible for 5% of all human-induced emissions. So restoring peatlands reverses this process, as said. By re-wetting and reintroducing native vegetation, we stop emissions and transform them back into carbon sinks, which is essential. Also for habitats of wildlife. But bringing it a bit closer to home, it brings also tangible benefits for us and our communities. For example, restored peatlands improves water regulation, water quality that we use to drink, to irrigate our food, to wash ourselves, and it reduces disasters, as mentioned, like floods and wildfires, by acting like natural sponges and protecting our homes. So it is a worthy investment, restoring peatlands. The manual outlines 3 key steps in restoring peatlands. First, re-wetting is crucial. This involves blocking drainage ditches and restoring the natural hydrology of peatland. By raising the water table, we stop the peat from drying out, halting carbon emissions almost immediately. Second, restoration focus on vegetation recovery. Native plants, especially mosses, are reintroduced because they are a foundation of a healthy peatland. These plants not only rebuild the peat layer over time, so patience is needed, but also they provide a habitat for rare species of birds, insects, other wildlife. And finally, ongoing monitoring ensures that the restoration is effective. This involves tracking water levels, vegetation growth, the return of wildlife, and the manual provides practical tools and case studies to help managers achieve this. Restoration projects can also create economic opportunities. For instance, some areas use restored peatlands for sustainable tourism. which provides both income and environmental protection, as well as protecting aesthetics and beautiful fauna and flora. But income opportunities I will discuss a bit later. Last but not least, next slide, please, the Forestry in Peatlands manual. This manual is on balancing sustainable forestry practices with the protection of peatland ecosystems. Peatlands are also drained for forestry, as you can imagine. And as you know, forests themselves store carbon and filter out water. But the capacity of peatlands per square meter compared to forests to do so is much, much greater. When forests are planted and managed poorly on peatlands, they cause significant damage. So draining the land for tree growth releases large amounts of CO2 and sometimes cannot quite be appropriate because it's undermining the very climatic benefits that forestry aims to provide, but the peatland does better. So this manual is a guide to managing forests on peatlands responsibly, ensuring that the forestry operations align with environmental and climate goals for peatlands to achieve the greatest potential of carbon storage. So slightly indicated now, forestry in peatlands comes with complex challenges. Peatland soils are waterlogged and nutrient poor, making them unsuitable for conventional tree planting without drainage. The roots of the trees, as you can see on the painting, on the picture, are hindered to grow if there's too high water level. That is, some tree species cope well when it is really when there are wet conditions, and some bugs naturally are home to pines, more upland bugs, and alder, which is lowland bugs. So sustainable forestry in these areas require rethinking how we manage water levels, tree species, and overall land use, and see in which peatland forestry is appropriate. So the first priority in any forest in peatlands is maintaining or restoring the natural water levels. By minimizing drainage, we can protect the integrity of peat and drastically reduce the carbon emissions, as mentioned before. In the areas that are already damaged, the focus shifts to transitioning from traditional forestry or conventional forestry to a more sustainable approach. And this can include planting species that tolerate wet conditions or even rewilding certain areas to allow native peatland vegetation to recover. As mentioned before, the tree type alder, that one particularly grows really well. The difficult part will be the mechanized cultivation, but it is already practiced in Germany. Another key strategy could be adaptive management, where forestry operations are adjusted based on the continuous monitoring of environmental conditions. So as the peatland improves, so does the forestry management change. The manual emphasizes that a landscape level approach where forestry planning considers the surrounding peatland ecosystem can really minimize damage and enhance resilience. Additionally, restoring degraded forested peatlands enhances biodiversity by creating habitats for rare species of plants, birds, and insects, as mentioned in the restoration manual. So it is quite important that we align forestry operations with global climate change goals and biodiversity goals to support this reduction of emissions, this carbon storage, and our ecosystem resilience. Next slide, please. Looking at the more practical side of the manuals and linking them to the name of this webinar, which is the role of the Common Agricultural Policy. For those who do not know too much about the Common Agricultural Policy, I'll just go through it. The CAP, as it's known, is a cornerstone policy of the European Union that supports sustainable agriculture, rural development, and environmental protection. And across the manuals, from the farming to the restoration and forestry, the CAP plays a vital role in promoting and funding these sustainable practices. How does it do so? Through eco schemes, for example. Under the latest CAP reforms, farmers and landowners can access funding through eco schemes which reward sustainable practices. This includes peatland compatible activities like maintaining high water levels, practicing pallidiculture, or using low impact forestry methods. There are agri-environmental measures, which are also a type of funding for conservation practices such as ditch blocking, wetting peatlands, and restoring degraded ecosystems. Rural development programs, which is Pillar 2, restoration projects and alternative land uses are often funded through the CAP, through their rural development measures, which really tries to encourage more innovation, sustainability, biodiversity. And then you have the compliance requirements, where farmers and foresters receive CAP payments, and they must adhere to certain environmental standards, such as maintaining soil health, water management, which is directly relevant to peatlands here. So in essence, the CAP incentivizes and supports sustainable land management practices that protect peatlands while allowing continued agricultural and forestry productivity. There are, of course, certain restrictions and limitations to the CAP. The CAP has been evolving and there's still some changes needed, but I believe Wiktor, our second speaker, will talk about that more in his presentation, and we can discuss it later in the Q&A. There are other funding options, the EU LIFE programs. These are European Union funding instruments as well, but dedicated to environmental, nature conservation, and climate action projects. So unlike the CAP, which focuses on agriculture and rural development, LIFE is aimed specifically to environmental challenges. Many LIFE projects target peatland ecosystems, restoring degraded areas, reintroducing native species, and enhancing biodiversity. Climate action is also quite important in the LIFE projects that re-wet peatlands to stop carbon emissions and re-establish their role as carbon sinks. And it tries to encourage innovative techniques by piloting some methods that can later on be scaled up. How is CAP and LIFE linked? I think that's quite an interesting viewpoint, because while CAP and EU LIFE serve very distinctive purposes, they often complement each other, particularly, I think, in the context of peatlands. They both try to mitigate climate change, to protect biodiversity, to support land uses, sustainable land uses. And while the CAP focuses, as I said, on sustainable practices among farmers and foresters, LIFE funds try to get sort of more the innovation in it and this and that. So LIFE projects often influence the broader EU policies, including CAP, by providing evidence and models for improvement. And the great thing is, there's a linkage, is that for landowners, they can benefit from both programs. For instance, let's say a farmer might receive direct payments from the CAP while participating in a LIFE project that will help re-wet and restore their peatlands. But of course, there are also other options. There's, for example, the carbon market and private investment sector, which many peatland restoration efforts are eligible for carbon credits under the voluntary carbon markets. By restoring peatlands or switching to peatland to wet farming, a landowner can generate income from selling these carbon credits. Private investors and conservation organizations may also provide funding for peatland projects, especially if there are biodiversity benefits. Of course, there are national and regional programs. Many EU countries provide additional funding for peatland conservation through national, as I said, initiatives, and the manuals now and then try to highlight certain one of these not for all countries, because it's a bit tricky, but for some countries, to give an idea. And the great thing is here that you can always have a blended funding resources. So landowners can combine, as I said, CAP with LIFE, but then also have carbon credits, get some private funding to finance their peatland projects. So there's different ways. For a bit more practical, sort of specific example, I believe a farmer can use the CAP to fund through eco schemes. The LIFE funding can help ditch blocking, for example, infrastructure, and then the carbon credits can offset those costs so that they can sort of cover each other. Next slide, please. I believe this is all for me. These are the 3 manuals in a very short summary. I hope I made you curious enough to have a look at them. Make sure, please, to look at the EUKI webpage around Christmas or New Year's to find the first manuals. And of course, if there are any questions, please ask them here, or you can also write us an email either to the EUKI team or to myself. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Leonor. And I see we've got our next speaker here. Joining us, Wiktor Kotowski from the Warsaw University, and I think you can tell something about you as well. And please share your presentation.
I'm sharing my screen. Good morning, everybody. I can't see you, but thank you for coming. I'm Wiktor Kotowski from Wetland Conservation Center based in Warsaw and the University of Warsaw. And I was asked to look at the Common Agricultural Policy, how peatland issues are addressed in the current CAP, and how it should change to address them better. So most of the photos that illustrate are from Poland. And okay, to start with, we have around 35 million hectares of peatlands in the European Union, and only some of them look like this. These are Polish fens. Some of them are forested, but on average, around half of EU peatlands are degraded. Peat extraction and drainage for agriculture and forestry. But this degree of degradation is very uneven. We know that, and the countries that we have in our project are leaders of destruction. So then they look, for example, like this, ditched, eutrophised, managed frequently just for subsidies. As you see here, the hay is not used. Ditched with nearly no water, so we lose water retention, we lose all ecosystem services that Leonor was referring to, and some of them applaud. And in some countries, this management of drained peatlands differs with countries. In some countries, arable agriculture is very common on peatlands. In others, like Poland, permanent grasslands prevail. And this is one of important issues with CAP and actually also nature restoration law, which sometimes recognizes conversion of arable land to grasslands as the main means of peatland restoration, which is not actually. So both these grasslands and these fields lead to very fast degradation of peatland organic matter, loss of water, and loss of biodiversity in adjacent areas. So we are not only talking about the problems within agricultural areas, but also in the connected conservation areas. Okay, let's look in the 5 countries of the project. In Belgium, 76% are degraded. This is after Peatland Map of Europe, published by Franziska Tannenberger and others from Greifswald. Ireland, 82% degraded. Poland, 85%. Netherlands, 95%, and Germany, 98% of peatlands are degraded, mainly due to drainage. So these are actually the leaders. If you look at global peatland assessments, the European countries, Ireland, Poland, Netherlands, Germany are the leaders, with Denmark of destroying peatlands. Belgium is not mentioned on this list, but is also very close. especially Flanders should be here at the end. It is merged in other countries because of the small peatland coverage. In 2019, some 20 organizations led by Greifswald-Meyer Center published recommendations for peatlands in the EU Common Agricultural Policy after 2020. And this is a few-page briefing, or position paper, but I want to focus on these 3 main goals that were set for the new Common Agricultural Policy to address peatland issues. So first, the new CAP should guarantee eligibility of farmed wet peatlands for CAP payments. In other words, paludiculture should be eligible for CAP. It wasn't in several countries like Germany recognized as eligible. Second, CAP payments for drained peatlands and drainage-based peatland utilization should be phased out. Should be stopped, maybe not immediately, but we should see instruments to assist phasing out of these drainage-based payments. And third recommendation or long-term objective, establishment of result-based agricultural payment schemes remunerating ecosystem service provision, such as low greenhouse gas emissions from peatlands. So these 3 goals were set, and I will now look how much of that has been delivered. We all have been busy lobbying at the European Parliament and then at the country level to deliver these objectives over the last couple of years. And let's see where we got. So the first question, are wet farmed peatlands eligible for CAP payments? And this seems to be the only achievement already achieved at the level of Common Agricultural Policy and European Parliament regulations. Paludiculture is mentioned per se as an eligible agricultural practice in CAP. We don't have specific regulations at the country level to facilitate paludiculture anyway in the countries within the project. But it seems that this obstacle to include paludiculture, to include, for example, cattail plantations in CAP payments has been crossed, has been removed. So some success. The second question, are we phasing out Common Agricultural Policy payments for drained peatlands? Okay, let's look which instruments do we have. At EU level, there is an important regulation called conditionality or GAG 2, which requires appropriate protection of wetlands and peatlands within agricultural land. There is a condition that these wetlands and peatlands should be eligible as agricultural land, so it should be manageable in some way. But then they should be protected. And let's see how this requirement is implemented at the country levels. Because this GAEC 2 seems to be the most important regulation for peatlands that we have in CAP. And we have been counting a lot on this regulation, actually. In Flanders, or Belgium in general, I'm not sure how much of that is general Belgian regulation and what is Flemish. We have an assumption that peatlands have already been well preserved. I got this both from our partners in the project and by reviewing national documents in Flemish, it is assumed that peatlands and wetlands are well protected under national legislation. There is a ban on changing wetland vegetation, and if you cannot change wetland vegetation and drainage is specifically prohibited there, then the authorities assume peatlands are protected. This is stronger in Natura 2000 areas, but this type of wetlands, peatland vegetation is also protected outside Natura 2000 areas. However, this is my comment, this does not apply to peatlands already transformed. We know that in 2023, new peatland inventory was expected to deliver a new map of agricultural peatlands that are not covered by protection yet. And according to a recent update, this has not been delivered. There is no political agreement about the study, our partners say. So it seems that we don't have an implementation of GAEC 2 in peatlands that have not been protected by other means yet in Belgium. Please, those coming from Belgium, Flanders, correct me after this seminar if I'm wrong. There is a short text in the regulation in Belgium, National Strategic Plan, I think, that for agricultural parcels other than permanent grasslands designated as ecologically sensitive and located in wetlands or peatlands, the minister may elaborate an appropriate protection framework. So this is a window for some future actions. Next one. Sorry, not this side. Ireland. Also, this should be easy to Google in English. It seems that there is no transparency, and there is an application for extension of GAEC to beyond January 2025 due to, and this is citation, quotation, complexity of implementation. I can imagine that in Ireland, but still this is quite disappointing. Netherlands. The only regulation connected to the implementation of GAEC 2 is to maintain certain water tables decided by the water authorities, but this refers to agriculturally used peatlands, whether grasslands or arable lands. You have to adjust to water tables, but they are still draining. Yeah? The water tables are usually far below 40 centimeters. And it was adjusted that all peatlands should be within a certain agreement scheme that this water tables should not be lowered further. A more ambitious implementation of GAEC 2 requires an update of the soil type maps, is said, and we haven't seen this more ambitious implementation in the Dutch system. Germany looks more promising, especially that that Germany has introduced a definition of wetlands and peatlands that are eligible for GAEC 2. So we have a very precise delineation where this norm applies. And wetlands and peatlands for GAEC 2 are soils with or areas with soils that have at least 7.5% of organic soil carbon content, or at least 15% of organic soil organic matter in a 10 centimeters thick soil layer in the upper 40 centimeters of the profile. This is interesting. This is a level, this 7.5 carbon content or 15% organic matter that characterizes strongly decomposed peat. So this is very appropriate because with drainage, mineralization of peat, we lose organic matter, and this heavily degraded sites in the upper horizon have indeed soil organic matter of 15, 20, sometimes 30%, but no more. And but we are still losing, while draining them, we are still losing organic matter that is deeper, because there is a transition of this drainage zone towards deeper horizon. So this is very good. What is prohibited? Permanent grasslands and permanent orchards in wetlands and peatlands should remain as they are, should not be converted into arable land or plowed, with exception for establishment or clearing of permanent crops. So there is an exception. Plowing should not be deeper than 30 centimeters, but this restriction is quite conservative and doesn't help much, because this is the normal level of plowing, used in Central Europe or in general in conventional agriculture. So this is this restriction to 30 centimeters doesn't help much. Palodiculture is allowed, except in high nature value areas, and that is a nice restriction, that we should not convert high nature value areas into palodiculture. For the rest, it is allowed. Building new drainage ditches or repairing old drainage ditches requires approval from environmental authorities. So this is the question: which conditions have to be fulfilled to get this approval? Let's look to Poland. And there is a big surprise that turned out recently, some 1.5 months ago. A preliminary condition for GAEC 2 to apply was soils with at least 30% of organic matter. So that is already twice higher than set in Germany. But now we have a new regulation, and they changed it into 60% of organic matter in soil profile, at least 40 centimeters thick. That means that actually all degraded peatlands, so with soil organic matter depleted due to peat mineralization, will not be covered by the norm. This is a very strange regulation. In practice, so in theory, permanent grasslands cannot be converted to arable. Renovation is only allowed every 4 years. There is a prohibition of plowing, any plowing, and peat extraction and building new drainage ditches. Looks good. However, if you combine it with this first restriction to soils that have more than 60% of organic matter content, this means that it applies only to well-preserved peatlands, which are not agricultural peatlands, actually, and those that have been drained for at least the last decades, they are out because they have less organic matter. So this is a very, very strange trick to get out of the norm most of our decomposing degraded peatlands. So summing up, GAEC 2 implementation is very weak. It misses the very intention of the norm. So the intention was to protect agriculturally drained peatlands and lower the emissions and water losses. It doesn't work. Maybe in Germany, that's the best implementation, and countries use various tricks to limit the applicability of this norm. Let's go further. Second recommendation was to phase out cap payments. So this is a summary, not further. Summing up, the second objective of the recommendations from 2019 is actually completely not achieved. We are not phasing out cap payments for drained peatlands, and despite this regulation at EU level, the implementation is very weak, perhaps except of Germany. And a third part, do we have result-based agricultural payment schemes for ecosystem service provision from peatlands? I'm checking time. Okay. Let's see. In Flanders, no payments dedicated to rewetting and maintenance of high water tables in peatlands exists. Some relevant instruments are eco schemes dedicated to permanent grasslands, so maintenance or conversion of temporary grasslands to permanent grassland, but it says nothing about water tables. Yeah, in Ireland, there is a package, or I'm not sure what is the level of this regulation, low input peat grasslands that requires retaining high water levels on grasslands, on peat soils. And there is another measure to facilitate water table management at a catchment and landscape scale of at least 40. So this is the ambition of the regulation, 40,000 hectares of drained agricultural managed carbon-rich soil. So I still didn't look carefully into the content of this eco scheme or this regulation, but the level of ambition is very low, given that peatlands cover 20% of Ireland. So this is not a good level of ambition. In the Netherlands, no agricultural payments to rewetting or maintenance of high water level. In Germany, there is an agri-environmental scheme, peatland protection, and this is specific in different lands, the requirements, so these federal countries. However, each federal country sets an area limit for this agri-environmental scheme, and these area limits are very low. When I looked carefully into them, I have no time to discuss that further. So despite the scheme looking quite good for the requirements, the sum of money dedicated to this and area that the federal countries are willing to rewet and cover by this protection is, yeah, it is calculated in thousands of hectares per. So it should be tens or hundreds of thousands. There is some other relevant schemes, eco scheme, extensification of all permanent grasslands on the farm, or agri-environmental schemes, conversion of arable into grasslands and extensive grassland management. But this is not about water levels. In Poland, we don't have any payments for rewetting. We have a water retention payment since last run of Common Agricultural Policy, so this is not entirely new. They now want to make it applicable to the whole country, but the level of payment is very low. It is something like 70 euro per hectare per year for at least 2 weeks of flooding of your land. So this is not payment for rewetting. This is a payment for willingness to have your land flooded. The idea is okay, but the level of payments is completely unsatisfactory because it doesn't compensate for long-term rewetting and income forgone. We are prolonging existing habitat and bird protection schemes, agri-environmental and climate schemes, including peatlands. But even in the peatland package of the scheme, there is no incentive to rewetting. Yeah? There is no requirement and no payment for filling ditches. So answering the question, do we have result-based agricultural payment schemes for ecosystem service provision from peatlands? No, we don't have in general in Europe. So now I come to recommendations. Sorry, Wojtek, for speaking a little bit longer than expected.
So fine, please carry on, Wiktor.
Okay, so first recommendation is clear. We have a nice norm at the EU level. Let's implement it seriously. Yeah, so it's actually a recommendation, but maybe even more. It's a demand towards European Commission, DG Agro, so that they look seriously at the implementation of their own norm. Yeah, we have to ban any soil plowing except for establishment of paludiculture. This limitation to 30 centimeters of plowing does nothing for protection of peat. We should set water tables at minimum 20-30 centimeters, so to rise them from current 50, 40, or sometimes deeper. And most important of all, we have to cover all peatlands by the norm. If the norm is worded as it is, protection of peatlands and wetlands, with no exception, it should not allow to leave most of your peatlands outside of the GAEC 2. So I think we should follow the German definition of at least 15% of soil organic matter. 30 is reasonable because 30% is the soil science is recognized by soil science commonly, conventionally, but 60% is an absurd. And all arable land should be converted to permanent grasslands, but by mandate by implementation of GAEC 2. So this is quite simple and straightforward. Then, to compensate for this ambitious implementation of conditionality, we should have eco schemes or agri-environmental schemes that are result-based, that are implemented on voluntary basis, but are paid adequately to compensate for income forgone and investment costs. And this, I mean, hundreds of euro per hectare, 500 houses, 500 euro per hectare per year, this level. So to really have compensation for the lost income from this short-term conventional agriculture. And we need an eco scheme, paludiculture. In none of the countries it existed. And the third recommendation that is repeated from several previous reviews and recommendations that some organizations did. We need long-term payments for peatland restoration. Peatland restoration is not something that you achieve within 4 or 5 years. We need to look at least to organize at least 15-20 years agreements with farmers that are investment-based. So we have to pay for the investments of filling ditches and building water locks and assure permanence of climate effects. Yeah, if you just rewet a peatland for a few years and you don't secure this result for the next run of common agricultural policy, then your effects may be compensated or flattened by the methane emissions within the first 2 years, and you don't achieve much. So we need long-term agreements. An idea could be to combine agri-environmental schemes with carbon credits and have payments proportional to emission reductions. But this is a bit hindered by the fact that we still don't have good proxies, accurate enough to estimate emission. But it could be done in certain steps and classes, and perhaps other ecosystem service provision could be also remunerated, like nutrient income from agricultural lands, so removed in peatland buffer zones. This long-term agreements do exist in common agricultural policy in implementation. In some countries, afforestation payments work like this. In Poland, farmers get first payment for planting forests, and then for 20 years they get extra payments for maintaining the forests. We could do something similar for peatlands. Additional thing, this is almost I think this is the last slide. If it is too difficult, if it is too ambitious, and if we cannot convince national authorities nor the EU to really implement conditionality for peatlands on horizontally, then we should consider regional programs. We should identify priority areas for peatlands and wetland programs based on smart eco-hydrological landscape planning. We should have paludiculture zones around peatland protected areas to secure that there is enough water in the landscape for protecting our best peatlands. We should have this long-term agreements zoned in the zones around most important peatland complexes in such a way that we protect enough water in the landscape on the long run. We should take advantage that peatlands are deliver other targets of nature restoration law and other policies. We should combine payments for peatlands rewetting with buffer zones, with payments for buffer zones. It is sometimes the same areas can deliver both emission reductions and nutrient removal, and then farmers should be paid twice. Why not? The same areas can serve as high biodiversity areas within agricultural land for bird restoration, pollinator restoration. Let's add payments so that farmers can really see the benefits of restoration. This is the third point is addressing the likely resistance of farmers to more ambitious implementation of conditionality. Yeah, governments are afraid of farmers' fury that they have to change their practices on peatlands, higher water tables, convert arable into grasslands. And a way out of this is to have really ambitious voluntary programs, voluntary payments, eco schemes, and agri-environmental schemes, and these long-term schemes. We should combine these two instruments. And then if that doesn't work, we still have instruments of land purchase, expropriation, preemption of strategic peatland areas from farmers, and that could also be done for money from the agricultural sectors. It's commonly not done. It's usually done in the environmental protection sector, if at all. And last but not least, we still need to talk to educate, exchange knowledge, especially with farmers and decision makers, both ways. Yeah, we have to understand why farmers are resistant to take up measures for peatlands restoration, and why decision makers are so resistant to this, as we see, with implementation of common agricultural policy instruments. Okay, thank you very much, and I hope we can still have some time for questions.
Thanks a lot, Wiktor. It was really great presentation. However, we are far away after our time schedule, but I hope that you can still stay with us for a short Q&A session. And I would say that both presentations were for me so interesting that I had no part to interrupt you. So I hope you will try to answer some. I see 6 questions there. Let me check the first one. Okay, the first question from anonymous attendee was to Leonor. As the representative of ELO, could you provide successful cases or share some experiences you have witnessed in implementation of agriculture or other sustainable economic activities that were a win-win for landowners, land managers, or farmers, and the peatland restoration missions? Thanks. Will you try to answer this question, Leonor?
Yes, sorry, I didn't see before the Q&As. I was looking at the chat and then I saw there weren't any questions, but we have some, which is great. Thank you so much for the question. I do kind of want to say that I don't want to tell you so that you have to read the manuals and force you to have a look at them. I and now I'm thinking all of forestry. I'm afraid I don't have a particular case study in mind just yet. I know that we have one in the manual, I believe, but yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of examples that are beneficiary and have been successful in doing so, which really goes to show that landowners have the opportunity to use their land, not leave it sort of forgotten and abandoned. I would almost like to say that I wouldn't have used the word, Wiktor, resistant, that landowners are resistant to this change or to manage their peatlands. I actually think a lot of landowners want to do it, they just don't know where to start, or more sort of trickier is how to finance it. And I think that's why I had a whole slide on saying what is available now. I agree with a lot of the recommendations Wiktor did, that it's still a bit tricky. I do find that landowners are wanting to use their land and protect their land. They're part of their land, they connect to the land, they come from it, it's sort of where their roots are. In German you say Heimat. So being able to use your land with crops that work with it quite well. Here it depends, of course, what is your water level, if it's already degraded or not. If it's degraded, try and raise that, try and re-wet so that the carbon can be stored. And using crops that are natural, sort of not natural, but more native to your area, so that they work, so that the roots don't wither and get soggy. I hope that answers your questions. I'm very sorry that I don't have a direct example right now. Please look at the manuals, and if you want, you can also drop me an email and I'll send you some examples. I think that's actually much easier, if that's okay. Thank you so much for the question.
Excellent, Leonor. Maybe I can add very quickly that just next year
Please.
we'll start a new project under Horizon Europe, Palus Demos, led by University of Galway, and there's also the other twin project, Paluwise, and this is exactly to create such demonstration sites for polyculture. So not yet there, but in a few years definitely there'll be some great sites to visit and to see how it's working. And yes, and Wiktor, you'd like to add to this something, or we can go to the next one, right?
I think that was clear. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, so Laura asked, do I understand that there's no cap scheme that provides funds for the conversion of already drained peatland to re-wetted peatland? Only the protection of peatlands that are still in a near natural state, right?
I haven't found any information that something like this exists, except perhaps for this, towards a near natural state, probably no. There is this peat grassland package in Ireland, and there is this German peatland agri-environmental scheme that is restricted to quite small areas. So this may be the two exceptions, but still not implemented on a satisfactory scale.
And Leonor, as you would like to add something, right? No?
I just saw that Laura said that her questions have been answered, and so I was just reading the next one, because as I said before, and I didn't see that they were in the Q&A. I kept looking at the chat, so I'm just reading them while listening to what Wiktor has to say. Sorry.
Okay, so I think the question of Laura is solved. So let's move to the next one. Anonymous attendee. Is there any possibility that the CAP would fund the restoration of agricultural peatlands to the state in which they are not used anymore for agriculture?
Oh, this is a very good question, because we have a specific footnote in the CAP regulation that peatlands and wetlands should be recognized as eligible agricultural land where some sort of agricultural management is eligible. However, we also have regulations that require restoration of non-productive lands in the agricultural land, non-productive habitats. We need buffer zones, and we need to restore habitats for pollinators and birds. So that's why I mentioned combining these ideas, buffer zones don't have to be stripes along the water courses. They can have any shape. So if we combine different regulations and different commitments, then we could include non-managed parcels, non-managed lands within agricultural land as normal, as eligible land, I think. But that requires some tricky management, specific instruments. In general, it seems that restoring towards nature is generally outside of CAP schemes. Yeah, then if we decide that that drained peatland should be restored towards a non-managed wilderness area, then we have to withdraw them from agriculture, include some climate payments or other environmental payments, and as I'm saying, except for these non-productive pieces of land within agricultural landscape.
May I put in a thought?
Yeah,
something. I think to say that peatlands should be completely outside of should be part of the CAP, but then not on agricultural produce is a bit tricky, given that the common agricultural policy is focused on agriculture. And so I think the idea of Wiktor beforehand, the recommendation of sort of phasing out peatlands from agricultural practices perhaps is more appropriate here. And I do agree that with the GAE2, the implementation, there's a map actually that was created for the summary overview of the 27 member states facts and figures from the CAP strategic plans, which was, I think, published last year. And there you can really see that the final year for certain countries to implement is 2025, which is already next year. So we are behind. Wiktor, I completely agree that we have to have a bit more serious implementation there. But I would say that keeping peatlands in the CAP, but then not having them at all agricultural, makes it very complicated. And I think the overview is quite difficult. So it would be perhaps better, I would say, to have peatlands part of a different set. We have the fantastic new nature restoration law and Article 10, which is very much trying to help improve biodiversity loss, to improve ecosystem services, and focus more on the environmental side. So it would be great, as you said, phasing out peatlands a bit from agriculture and phasing it into something else, because I think combining a lot of EU regulations, as I said beforehand, you had CAP and then you had LIFE. I think LIFE here is really an opportunity for us to learn and pilot a lot of solutions and then have them impact the CAP, have them influence other EU directives, which perhaps means also that we're taking out peatlands out from CAP and putting it somewhere else so that they really get protected. As you said, they should be protected.
Yeah.
I think the source of emissions that they emit is so high, and there's such a potential to store so much carbon that it would be a shame if we lose that potential. But I think again, before the idea that I quite didn't finish with combining it, but combining lots of regulations, there you have the potential of it becoming very complex. And I think we already have a lot of things that are quite complex overall in the European Commission. And so in Europe, I mean, in general, is that I think it's better if we don't try to link too much so that it becomes quite a sort of slow, like a very tight spider web, let's say, where everybody doesn't quite know where's the start, where's the finish, where do I have to go, what's the paperwork here, this and that. That I think it would be much better, and especially for landowners, land managers, anybody involved, give the freedom of providing lots of different tools, and you choose which tool fits for your situation, so that you have everything that you need to support you, but at the end of the day, you make the decision. Because I think, as I said beforehand, I don't think landowners are too resistant to be a part of this. They, of course, also want their land to stay healthy forever so that they can give it to the next generation, because most landowners have this mindset of it's to do with family legacy. I need to protect this for the next generation. That being able to provide them with the tools and they choose what they want to do while being within the regulation of the EU. I think regulation is very useful. Creates this more flexible approach, which also means that in case something happens, you are able to think critically, which is very important, and then act appropriately in your situation that might be different to your neighbors or the neighboring country, etc. So I think here what would be a great recommendation is having something where a landowner can be a bit more in control rather than being in small little parameters and not quite sure what he's allowed to do, what he's not allowed to do, what is everything that's forbidden. If everything is forbidden, sort of everything is also allowed. So that's a bit tricky there. And I think result-based schemes, as Wiktor was recommending is definitely great. I know that the European Commission produced a guidance on development of public and private payment schemes for forest ecosystem services. I'd love to see something like that also for peatlands. Yeah, I hope perhaps that we can move in that direction. That's all from me. Next question.
Okay, perfect. So I see the last question, it's a question from Neres. Neres is he's our Eurosite member from Lithuania, his organization. So great to see you here. The question is, rewetting is not accepted now because IPCC methodologies account methane emissions from weighted peatlands. As they assess the current stage of land use, not what will happen in 30 years, is it possible to change it?
Yeah, good question, Neres. Hi, nice to see you. That's why we keep repeating that we need long-term schemes. Yeah, that's it should not all be accounted for the first few years. Indeed, emission factors of IPCC for rewetted land are quite high because of this methane peak that may occur, but not always within the first years. Yes, if we have longer schemes, then we can average this post-rewetting emissions, and then this methane will not count much. But for that, we need long-term schemes, and I think the accounting of ecosystem services and payments should be analogous to that we are thinking of in carbon offset schemes. Yeah, that's the same idea, only non-commercial but public.
And may I just add maybe a bit of a provocative comment in that to say that rewetting is not accepted because of the way that we measure it shows that it's might have a negative effect, or we don't quite know how to measure it yet, or that we're having difficulties with the measurement. I would argue that rewetting is essential because we can see that the carbon emissions get stopped, or not stopped, but reduced. And we need to store as much carbon as possible, given the fact that we have climate change, given the fact that we lose so much biodiversity, we have more risks towards natural disasters, floods, wildfires, etc. That I am hoping with time, not too much time, that we find better methodologies to allow the action that we actually need to do. So technically it should be the other way around. We should be able to do the task and then figure out how to measure it correctly, because if we don't allow it because we don't know how to measure it, it's a bit of a lose-lose situation.
I think it's simpler. We won't measure it on every parcel. That's impossible. We need to take assumptions for proxies, and depending on water tables before and after, we should set classes and then adjust payments in several steps, and not make it too complicated. The issue is that these emission reductions can differ. Yeah, it's very difficult to have them result-based on the long run because many factors can affect emissions, yeah, annual temperatures, rainfall, etc. So here I think we should pay for permanent activities, yeah, so removing drainage systems or rising water tables and the willingness to keep it for, say, 20 years. And we cannot base climate payments on results because, yeah, so we have to combine. Results-based schemes may refer to shorter term issues related to water tables and biodiversity, but with climate benefits that are for, we have to have these schemes for 15, 20, 30 years, then it's difficult to think about the values of emissions in 20 years. Yeah, we don't know what what average temperatures will be, rainfalls, etc. We have to base them on the changes in management. And maybe when I have a word still, I want to say that I agree and disagree with some of what you said, because we need different strategies for different sites. Yeah, and well, you actually told it that we have other instruments like LIFE projects, etc., to work on conservation and withdrawal of some peatlands from agriculture. We need to do it where it is necessary, because it's all combined. We cannot achieve nature conservation on protected areas because the same hydrological systems are being heavily drained by agriculture, and that they're in the same eco-hydrological landscape units. So that's why I was talking about identifying priority zones. And then in these zones, if there is no willingness from farmers to step into payment schemes, then we could use other options like land purchase or other means, but we have to pay for that adequately. And with willingness, yeah, you told farmers are willing to cooperate, but also to maintain their land for next generations. But that is often not possible. Yeah? If they don't convert into paludiculture, and many of them don't want to change completely their business, this is not what we want, because they were not told when peatlands were drained that this is not forever. Yeah, we cannot keep draining these peatlands, and even if we rise water tables from -50 to -30, we may have the emissions, but the emissions will still be there, and the impact on the landscape. So management of a drained peatlands is different. You cannot keep your land for next generations if you keep draining the peatland, and if you re-wet it, you have to change your business or sell it.
May I respond, or sorry?
Maybe very shortly, because I think that
Very shortly.
quite a lot of our attendees
think-
just left for shopping, so just try
Yes,
to conclude.
of course. No, of course. And thank you everybody who's still here and listening. I think to answer it in really just a sentence, I think here we have such a great opportunity of building bridges between landowners, science, the policymakers and so on, where we can really share the knowledge that those who are unaware of the benefits of paludiculture can see the benefits, and that policymakers can see that if it's unable to be implemented due to funding or tools lacking, that they can perhaps even cooperate with the tech industry, for example, that they come up with ideas. So I do think that we have potential to increase this willingness to participate, and that we have to do it all together. In a very short sentence.
Thank you very much.
But I would have liked to argue a bit more, but I know I can see that the time is short.
Let's exchange emails if you like.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the same also to others, other participants. If you have ideas to complement,
exactly, and thank
add
you
to my
Fergus
presentation,
for
please send me an email.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And this discussion was quite essential, I would say. So I would say I would love, for example, to continue this discussion on one of our meetings of our European Peatland Policy Working Group when we can get deeper into the details. It's great, and great to have some a bit different views. Wonderful. So just to summarize, just two notes from the chat that Stein from Naturkund mentioned that we'd like to contact you, Wiktor, to give you some data on the public reaction and the about GAEK2 in Flanders. So that might be quite important for our analysis. So we'll try to contact you, Stein, after the meeting. And I see something more, but also Fergus from Ireland said the nature-based payment scheme called ACRES, so also quite important for the analysis and general implementation of CAP. And
yeah, it's not Peatland specific, I think.
Yeah, but probably not. But
I looked at it. Yeah.
It includes Peatlands as well. Perfect. So as I wrote in the chat, well, I still see some people there. So sorry for taking you time to prepare for Christmas, but great that you could stay also for this prolonged Q&A session. And the recording and some links and data, whatever we'll link, we'll send to all participants by email after the webinar. And many thanks to Wiktor and to Leonor for your great commitment and presentations and very interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wojciech, for organizing, and thank you everybody for being here. And Merry Christmas to all.
Thank you, everybody. Thank Leonor and Wojciech. Yeah, good holiday time to you.